Jason.
Queen City News starts now.
Good morning. Welcome into Queen City News. Now 4 a.m. on your Friday. Go ahead and give yourself a pat on the back. You have made it to the end of the work week. Thanks for being with us. I'm Julian Sador.
And I'm meteorologist Andrew Brayman. Thanks for waking up with us dark and early on your Friday. Julian, we have made it. It's the end of the week. It's my final Queen City News now with you guys, at least for a little bit here. Teddy bears coming back on Monday. I know there's a lot of anticipation for that, but first, got to talk a little bit of heat this morning again.
The heat will help dry my tears.
Yeah, it's going to start moving up here across the Carolinas. Temperatures going to be returning to the 90s. Got up to 89 yesterday. I think 91 is going to be a good bet this afternoon, and only going to be getting hotter as we head through the weekend and into early next week. What do you got to know as you step out the door? Heating up today, staying dry. No wet weather is expected here on your Friday. More heat and humidity as we head into the weekend, and showers and storms possible. I'm saying there's a chance of an actual cold front moving through later next week. Right now, though, just pretty quiet here as you're stepping out the door this morning. Mostly clear here across the Carolinas. Nothing going on. Right now, uptown Charlotte, 72 degrees. Should be able to dip at least into the upper 60s here before we hit sunrise about around 6:05 this morning. Temperatures a lot of mid to upper 60s across the Carolinas. The QC continues to be that warm spot across the region and feeling really nice up in the mountains right now. Upper 50s and low 60s. Muggy meter is going to start to creep up a little bit closer to 65 today versus around 60 like we've seen over the past couple of days, but still not a major factor out there. Talking more, though, about the rising heat and humidity this weekend, Julian, coming up in a few minutes with my full forecast.
All right, Andrew, thank you. Emergency homeless shelters run by the Salvation Army in Gastonia will shut down about a month from now. Leaders of the charity organization say it's because they're shifting to a homelessness prevention strategy. But as Queen City News anchor Morgan Francis reports, the move has people living on the streets worried about what will happen next.
I'm basically, struggling with housing. I'm struggling with transportation. Communication is a problem.
For whatever reason, Thomas Helms says he was denied housing at the Salvation Army and has learned to live on the street in constant survival mode, washing car windshields if drivers let him.
I'm out here trying to eat. That's my day-to-day.
In about a month, other people will face the same reality after the Salvation Army announced they intend to close down the emergency shelter and only offer services they currently have, such as food assistance, case management, financial help, and clothing.
None of that is going to end. We're still going to be providing assistance to anyone who comes to our door. It's just that the emergency sheltering piece will no longer be there.
The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's Housing Inventory Count tracks homelessness across the country. Its latest report from 2023 states that at one point in time, there were 158 people staying in emergency shelters in Gaston and Lincoln counties. However, many would say that number isn't an accurate reflection of the real problem at hand. Currently, 75% of the people in Salvation Army's shelter have a job, and housing one person for a year costs them $10,000.
Through 70 different community leaders, we realize there is a more cost-effective strategic way of battling homelessness than just emergency sheltering, which is really just putting a Band-Aid on the issue.
Helms wishes a Band-Aid was enough. He has a record and a history of drug use, but he dreams of the day he's not living on the street and battles the devil on his shoulder, telling him to just give up.
If they lose this resource, then, what do we got to do? We got to absolutely take what we got to have. That's not the case. We can't do that. It's against the law, right?
Without this shelter, Helms worries efforts to cut costs will in turn harm the community in other ways.
I absolutely think the crime rate will go up, and it's going to be a lot more strain on the people that absolutely help the homeless.
Again, that was Morgan Francis reporting those emergency shelters will stop taking new residents on July 15th and will stop housing people entirely on August 31st. Organizers say they'll work with current residents to develop a transition plan and explore other housing options for them. The suspect at the center of a two-county chase and shooting this week is now in custody. The search for Jeremy Huffman started Wednesday. That's when he's accused of leading Lincoln County deputies on a pursuit in a stolen vehicle and firing shots at the deputies during the chase. Huffman is also accused of firing shots at a school bus that had children on board during the pursuit. It ended in Cleveland County, where the stolen vehicle crashed along Highway 74 in Shelby. Deputies say Huffman then ran into the woods and out of sight. A tip yesterday morning led them to a motel near the crash site where they spotted Huffman running across the road. He was caught in a grove of trees along Highway 74, and it turns out Huffman wasn't the only one in the vehicle that was being pursued. Jennifer Hughes, who was arrested yesterday after the crash, is facing firearms, drug, and obstruction charges. Her bond was set at just over $50,000. Meanwhile, Huffman is facing 5 counts of attempted murder, plus drug, firearms, and stolen vehicle charges. No bond was set for him. Additional charges are expected in Lincoln County. Nearly 3 weeks ago, the deputy chief of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department addressed the public, updating us on the investigation into the deadly Goneway Drive shooting April 29th. 4 officers died that day. Another 4 were wounded. During the news conference, the deputy chief explained what happened just before the first shots were fired. Take a listen.
The officer spoke into a megaphone and told Hughes to come out of the house. Do you think that approach should have been different? Do you think it would have resulted in something different? Do you think it would have been safe for the officers? Or?
No, I think it's a tactic that we use every day. It's called a surround and call out. And what we're doing is giving the suspect every opportunity to come out peacefully and, surrender to the officers that are there. So there's no doubt who we are, what we're there for. And like you said, he was on a megaphone letting them know, hey, we're U.S. Marshals, we're here for such and such.
So they were on the megaphone?
Yes, sir, that is correct. I can confirm that.
Is that like the same protocol over maybe going up to the door and saying, we have a warrant, please turn around and,
That's correct.
That is, okay.
And that was before the shooting happened?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, so that was done before the shooting happened, and then they approached the door, and then that's whenever you...
No, they didn't approach the door. So what they did was basically a surround and call out. They held their positions. They let him know who they were, why they were there, giving him every opportunity to come out for a peaceful resolution.
Now, 5 days later, an attorney representing CMPD stood up in court and told a different story of the events leading up to the first shots being fired. Take a listen to what they said 5 days later.
When the task force did decide it was time to approach that home, Mr. Hughes was outside. At some point, when he recognized law enforcement, he ran into the backyard and entered the home through that back door. He could be heard by officers on scene yelling, "Get down" or "Get out."
Now, CMPD's lawyer never mentioned a bullhorn, nor did she say there was time to surround the house. We're now nearly 2 months removed from this tragedy, and the official story from the people investigating it keeps changing. That's why Queen City News, along with WSOC and WCNC, sued to release a body camera video. But yesterday, our petition was denied. The judge made the same decision on a separate suit brought by the Charlotte Observer, New York Times, ABC News, The Assembly, and Spectrum News. Now, during our hearing earlier this month, more than 200 law enforcement officers packed the courtroom. 11 attorneys stood to oppose our motion, and 2 of the officers' widows addressed the court. It was extremely emotional. Queen City News Chief Legal Analyst Khalif Rhodes presented our case that the public needs to know what happened, and from an objective observer, not an internal investigation. Judge David Strickland did not agree. Queen City News is your local election headquarters. We're now less than 5 months away from the November election, and as the Republican National Committee prepares for its upcoming convention, they brought their Protect the Vote tour to the Queen City yesterday. That's a nationwide initiative to recruit poll watchers, poll workers, and legal experts. Volunteers are being trained in South Charlotte. RNC Chairman Michael Whatley was on hand for that. He was joined by North Carolina Congressman Dan Bishop, who's also running to be the state's next Attorney General. Republican leaders say election integrity is a top priority for them. Democrats accuse the GOP of using that idea as a way to intimidate voters and poll workers. Now, new polling in the race for the White House is now out. A survey from Emerson University and The Hill shows former President Trump holding a roughly 2-point lead over President Biden. That's within the poll's margin of error. As for some of the most sought-after battleground states, President Biden only up in one of them, Minnesota, and not by much. Former President Trump has a more than 4-point lead in Arizona and Georgia, both of which he lost to Biden in 2020. Now, there's also a new poll from Fox News showing Biden leading Trump by 2 points nationally. That's also within the survey's margin of error. But it's the first time the Fox poll has shown Biden ahead since October. Biden and Trump will square off in their first debate next week. It's set for Thursday night. South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham is teaming up with Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal to list Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. You're looking live at the U.S. Capitol, where a bipartisan bill to do that is now being considered. As D.C. correspondent Maddie Beer-Temple reports, it's in response to Russia's president signing a military pact with North Korea.
The U.S. currently considers Cuba, Iran, Syria, and North Korea state sponsors of terror. Two senators say Russia should be added to that list. Holding up an image of Russian President Vladimir Putin's visit to North Korea,
this picture says it all.
Connecticut Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal says Russia should be considered a state sponsor of terror.
Russia deserves to be in this small, selective club of atrocity-committing killers.
Blumenthal and South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham's bill would do just that. During Putin's visit, he witnessed a show of North Korea's military and signed an agreement with Kim Jong-un to defend each other in case of attacks. The senators say it's the last straw.
We have lost deterrence.
Lawmakers say their resolution would strengthen sanctions, isolate Russia on the world stage, and boost morale in Ukraine.
It is time for us to push back. Now is the moment.
Blumenthal says this is no substitute for sending more military aid to Ukraine as it defends itself from Russia. He says it's about being on the right side of history.
Democracy is under siege.
Last time lawmakers brought this proposal up in 2022, the White House said it's not the most effective way to deal with Russia and could have unintended consequences. Though the president has previously opposed these efforts, the White House said earlier this week that a deepening relationship between Russia and North Korea is concerning. In Washington, I'm Maddie Beer-Temple.
All right, back to your forecast this morning. It's going to be a toasty Friday here across the Carolinas. Temperatures starting to move back up into the lower 90s. Partly cloudy skies. Going to be seeing a lot of sun again. You want to grab those sunglasses as you step out the door. Pinpoint satellite and radar this morning. It is quiet. Nothing going on here across the Carolinas. We've got a lot of sunshine on the way as we wrap up the week. Currently 72 degrees. Uptown Charlotte. Winds out of the south-southeast at 3 miles an hour. Temperatures mid to upper 60s for the most part. Charlotte continues to be the lone exception where we're actually in the low 70s this morning. Mid to upper 50s. In the mountains, dew points, low to mid 60s. These are going to start to creep up a little bit here on our Friday. Talking more about your forecast and what you can expect coming up in just a few minutes.
All right, Andrew. Also, as far as what we can expect from the markets on this Friday, futures right now all in the red, Dow, NASDAQ, and S&P. We're going to talk with our Jane King live from the NASDAQ coming up in our next hour with more on the markets. A well-known restaurant in Mooresville is about to close down, but there's still some time to go for one last meal at Trackside, and part of it is going to a museum. That story straight ahead. You're watching Queen City News, the most local news in Charlotte. We'll be right back.
Your morning grind doesn't stop at 7 a.m., so we don't either.